tolerance and how important it is. How come there wasn't any leading up to the Qatar World Cup by way of the BBC choosing not to cover the opening?
Absolutely, it should be about tolerance. And in a way, World Cups and tournaments are about people getting together. Qatar deserved the criticism because there were concerns about English gay fans, whether they could actually, what would happen to them if they walked down the Corniche in Doha holding hands.
Men hold hands in Saudi well before homosexuality was accepted in the UK. It's the holier than thous that bothered me a lot in Western press. But 20 years ago, you weren't okay with that. Now that you're okay with that, you want to inflict that on me and demand that I'm okay with you. Everyone's on their own timeline.
In a way, and I agree there is an element of holier than thou, particularly not en masse, but I think sort of, individually. And I've definitely been accused of that by the sort of Qataris and Saudis over my coverage of Newcastle United.
All of a sudden, when we buy Newcastle, a team that, not many people were thinking of before the sale, for a very, I think, undervalued £305 million.
Unbelievable bit of business.
Brilliant business.
PIF, the Saudis, absolutely, the way they have handled it. But I think people do understand, maybe it's partly for investment, as you say quite rightly, that they've got it in absolute steel. It'll be worth $1 billion now.
The essence of Saudi Arabia, defined by its landscapes, its environment, its nature, the majesty of our flag, the prosperity of our future, and the strength of our palms. The surging waves, the height of our skies, and the vastness of our seas, the expanse of our deserts, the radiance of the present, and the permanence of our history. A canvas crafted by our land upon the sky of the world. Saudia, this is how we fly.
Should have got me and my brother in here, head to head, studio audience, and then had a vote at the end on which one won the Mo Show Ballon d'Or.
That's brilliant. Ballon d'Or. Loving the football lingo.
Everything's football with me, I'm afraid.
Amazing, amazing. It's a sport I grew up playing all my life.
Stowe's not huge.
It's not. But the school I was at over here was, Papelwick was rugby, Stowe was rugby. Yeah. So that's maybe where my interest dipped. And then I went...
Bit of rowing? Stowe had rowing?
No, not that I know. They had crew, but it wasn't as big as like some of the bigger schools in that area. When I went to the States, New Hampshire, that's where they take football seriously.
What's as a soccer?
As a soccer.
Right.
Yeah. I remember like they had, first of all, like in rugby, we'd have one coach. On the football team in New Hampshire, we had 4 coaches.
Wow.
On the varsity, as they say. Yeah. And they just take it so seriously. Before school starts, we'd have to show up 2 weeks before the beginning of the semester for training camp.
Wow. I just stay in.
Yeah, mid-August, you're in school for training camp if you are selected for the varsity team. And I think if I really focused, I would have, who knows, but I my aspirations were a club level in Saudi football. That's, if you can barely see me, that's me in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
All-star team, like I loved playing goal. It was my position. Like I used to be obsessed with football and even
they
more.
They did drag you into hockey. I thought that was huge.
But it was a big hockey school.
Yeah.
It was actually a hockey school.
Yeah, because my dad was at Yale, so we sort of got, and I think Tim was out there for a while.
Mm-hmm. He really has a following in the region, and I think it's delivering the message in a way that you are able to accept and understand is what pulls people to his delivery method, which is I think
he's a poet. If you hear him speak, and he's always had this ability, this extraordinary, I mean, the English language is incredibly rich, the language of Shakespeare, and Tim's just grasp of it has always been beautiful. I very rarely speak about Tim, so this is, it's a privilege to come on your podcast and talk about him and my love and my regard for my brother. But sense of humour, honestly, 100%. I understand the sort of reverence towards Tim, but as a brother growing up, brilliant sense of humour. In that very English way, wordplay, punning, irony.
Dry.
Yeah, very dry. I mean, we went to a school at Westminster where you were basically judged on humour. and academic achievement, but very much humour. So yeah, whenever I hear people, Tim, sort of talk about Tim in the public sphere as this, august Cambridge academic and imam, I'm thinking he's got a brilliant sense of humour as well. I think that do you remember that song Happy that came out?
Pharrell?
There was a really fun version by a group of not Islamic scholars, but anyway, by Muslims. And they almost played on Tim's sort of slightly dry personality, because you had everyone dancing around doing the happy bit. And then you had my brother looking like a classic Cambridge Don with his tweed jacket and, he's sort of his nice shirt and his smart trousers. And then he just had this sign which he turned over, like Love Actually. It turned over and it just had happy on it. And that was sort of Tim slightly praying against this. So absolutely he's got a sense of humour.
Well, we before I even introduced my guest today, we were talking about his brother who I had on the show. It was the third best performing episode.
No pressure on me.
No pressure. No pressure on you at all, never. And it's nice to hear, what Sheikh Abdal Hakim Murad, or Tim as Henry refers to him, what he was like. The person who we don't know today, we know him as the Sheikh, the scholar. And it's always nice to hear a bit of banter from a younger brother.
Yeah.
From a younger brother. So that was what that little conversation was about. Thanks for coming on the show on such short notice.
No, thanks for inviting me.
We're very lucky these days in Saudi, because all these crazy events are happening. And, whenever I'm in a position where I'm fortunate enough to grab someone for an hour or two, something like this would not have been an option 10 years ago, because we never hosted the FIFA Club World Cup, which is what you're here for. So thank you again for taking some time out of your day. I'm not sure how long you're going to be here for, but I know you have something in an hour and a half. So try to get as much as we can from you in the next
I'm
hour.
quite shallow. I'm not as deep as my brother. I can...
Famous last words.
Yeah. Give me a go.
You've been in Jeddah now for 4 days?
No, 48 hours, because I went to Anfield on Sunday for the big match. So Liverpool, Manchester United, and then I drove south and got on a plane the next day to Heathrow. At Heathrow.
Did that end 0-0, the Liverpool?
Yeah. And they were both lucky to get 0. It was it was a terrible game. It was quite inspiring if you were interested in absolute dogged rearguard defending by Manchester United, whose coach is under pressure, whose players were being criticised, biggest club, probably after Real Madrid in the world, huge scrutiny on them. If they lose a corner, the country just sort of stops and debates it, let alone lose a match. So they had to draw that, particularly against their rivals. It was, Liverpool had been playing well. So yeah, that was big, even though it was 0-0. I wrote, 1,100 words for the first edition, which goes within 5 seconds of the final whistle, and then the same for the second. So there's always a lot to write about with Manchester United, even with an absolute horror of a game.
I want to get into them in a second. For those just tuning in, trying to figure out who or what Mr. Henry Winter does, he's the chief football. He is the chief football writer at the Times, and football is what he lives and breathes, as I did for many years. So I'm really confident this conversation is gonna be an insightful one. So I'm a Chelsea fan. Before the PIF's acquisition of Newcastle.
This is turning into a confessional.
It is, yeah. And
Chelsea fans at the moment, whenever I meet them, they come up to me and say, "What is happening?" Although he had a decent result last night. Are you a Pochettino fan?
We did. I'm not.
Why? Because of Tottenham?
Because of Tottenham. And since Ancelotti, I didn't, outside of Jose Mourinho, since Ancelotti, I don't think we ever got someone on the level of Ancelotti's coaching abilities.
Yeah, and emotional connection. And also, Carlo Ancelotti is one of the world's great men, as well as he comes up with this great line, which is, football is the most important of the least important things. And I think it's even though my life revolves around football, I do effectively agree with that. It's a great quote from him. And this is a man who's won the Champions League as a player and as a coach, and he's just one of the greatest of all times, but one of the most humble men you could ever meet.
Ancelotti.
Oh, Ancelotti is just wonderful. I remember when he was Chelsea coach, and he wrote his life story and all the funds were to go to an old AC Milan, the family of an old AC Milan teammate of his who passed away suddenly from Lou Gehrig's disease. It was absolutely terrible. He left a wife and 4 kids. And Ancelotti, being one of the world's most generous men, wrote his life story with all the proceeds to go to the kids. And he invited me down to Chelsea's training ground at Cobham. And I went in, and there's the sort of steps which leads up to the sort of the corridor of power, which is where the physios and the sports scientists and the lawyers, always important with clubs, and Ancelotti's lair was. And I got to the top of the stairs, and Ancelotti was leaning outside of his door, a bit like a naughty schoolboy in an English boarding school, looking to see if there were any masters wandering around to check whether people were up late at night. And he said, "Can you see him?" I said, "What do you mean, can I see who?" "The doctor. Can you see the doctor?" I said, No, his door's closed. And he said, "Oh, fine, because I wanted a quick smoke." And that was typical Ancelotti. And you go into his office, and if ever you bump into him anywhere in the world, he will give you, he said, "Oh, you must go to this restaurant if we're in Madrid," or I imagine he'll be in Rio soon if he becomes Brazil manager. It would be fantastic because he'll be recommending restaurants. I love that approach to life in people. I'm sure you've met people like that who have life in perspective. He's passionate about football. He's worked with the greats, but he's got this humility to drive them on. But also he enjoys life as well. So I love that about him.
He comes off as a bit of the intimidating guy a little bit.
Ancelotti, I wouldn't want to cross him. I mean, his idea of intimidation is to raise an eyebrow. Okay. There's a sort of slight Bond villain there. If he raises an eyebrow, if he raises 2 eyebrows, to start running. But I just think that I don't think he intimidates. I think he inspires and he educates and he leads through the respect of his personality, because he has, even though he's achieved what he's done, all these multiple Champions League. And I think it's a great lesson generally in life, that often you find the people at the very top, and I've been fortunate to interview so many great footballers, the ones at the top, the ones I found at the top, tend to actually have the most grace, the most humanity, the most humility. Pele was a classic example. I've interviewed Pele 2 or 3 times for Saudi. I have to talk about him in the past tense, although his legacy will always be with us. And Pele had this grace. And I know, you want to talk a little bit about Tim, my brother, but I would say Tim's got that as well. And I think that's why, even though I'm blood, kith and kin, I can step back and see his greatness in terms of what he does, but also I can vouch for the grace that he has, the soul that he has. And I think the great people have that.
Truly. Before we get to Tim, I wanted to ask you one more thing about Ancelotti. You said he's going to...
Are you allowed to call him Tim? I'm allowed to call him Tim.
God, okay, yeah.
I mean,
that's
really, because I talk to Muslim friends, and I talk to taxi drivers out here in Qatar, and they insist on giving his full name. Yeah. And my brother's name is so long now, the taxi drive is almost finished by the time he gets to the Moran. So
I apologize to Sheikh Abdal Hakim Murad, and I blame you for that. It's rubbing off on me.
This is what journalists do. We drag you down to our level.
I love how honest you are.
But I see Tim the human being.
Yes.
And I think that's his greatness, because I think, I talk to people and he's given them good advice. Yeah. He's a good man, as well as being brilliant in his field.
Yeah. And feel free to say none of your business, but when he started to veer towards Islam, how did it make you feel? Were you ever like, do you really want to do this?
Proud. Absolutely. And we had a very famous headmaster at our school at Westminster who said that any child who lives in English, you went to an English public school, anyone who leaves an English public school with a working religion, that is whatever religion, I think that is great. That's something to be proud of. I mean, we grew up, I was a choir boy in Westminster Abbey for 3 years, Anglican background. I was confirmed in, I don't know what the equivalent in Islam is, but I was confirmed in Westminster Abbey. But I think what we do, and the world I work in, is you have to take a step back and actually look, and with religion, say religion has to be about humanity. It has to be about compassion, as in all elements of life. And I think when extremism comes in, extremism in whatever form, in whatever religion, then obviously that's when the alarm bells ring. But I think, I gave a talk in a synagogue 3 weeks ago in London, and it was a very powerful event because of what's been happening out there. But you have to understand and appreciate and respect. So coming back to your question, I don't think there was any issue in the family of, certainly not from my perspective. I don't think from my sister's perspective or my parents' perspective, because as a family, we were all encouraged, just pursue your passion. Mine was football. My sister's an outstanding artist. My sister's actually the most talented of the three of us.
Wow, that's saying something.
No, absolutely she is. I'm very much third on the pecking order. But so with Tim, the fact that he had this passion, he went to Cambridge, I think, to do geography, and then he changed, I think, to Arabic studies. So I think what my parents wanted for us, my father was a well-known architect, my mother was a quite well-known designer. I think what they wanted us, be happy, be healthy, and also just to achieve as much as we could. And I think, there were one or two times when my brother would have a book out and my parents would just be so proud about, Tim would have a book and they would say, the museum in Cambridge and the library in Cambridge has taken it, the library in Yale has taken it, the library in Harvard has, Boston University, all these great libraries have taken a first edition of Tim's book. And I'd go, well, how many copies are there? And they would go, about 2,000. I said, have you seen the Sunday Times bestseller list? I'm top of that. I've been selling that. And they would go, no, but Tim's is a serious book. So I would have to do that. And I would go, well, I can't compete with him, although my numbers were more. So there was that sort of rivalry, but also that huge respect that what Tim was not going into, but what became his passion. He absolutely loved. And also, the one thing you have to understand with my brother, the intellectual rigor with which he looks at anything in life, with which he looks at, whether it's his reading of the Quran, whether it's his reading of political, religious situations. He has just this amazing forensic mind, but also he has this compassion, this humanity, which gives, I think, the perfect balance. And I think occasionally, and I hope I'm not wrong on this, but when one or two Arab leaders have come over to the UK, I think Tim is occasionally called upon because of the respect that he is held. I mean, it's not as simple as that, but respect is held in the West and in the in the Middle East. And that makes me proud. Whenever I think of my brother, I always feel proud.
Yeah. And as you should. And then it's just staggering. It shouldn't be staggering or shocking that you guys sound so identical.
Really?
It's the only thing difference is the facial hair and the seating posture. He sat back the whole time.
Yeah.
We've been like this since we started.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how brothers can be, so similar at the same time, so different in their interest, body language. And, but I'm sure like when you guys are together and you connect, like you don't see much differences. There's more similarities than differences.
Yeah. We don't connect. We don't spend a lot of time together because Tim's incredibly busy. He has his students. And another thing that makes me proud, I was in Istanbul recently for the Champions League final. And in the build up to that, one of Tim's former students contacted me, and she was involved in the Red Crescent, which was dealing with the horrendous scenes from the earthquake. And she was wanting some connections with Premier League football and with UEFA, who are obviously organising the Champions League final. It's actually fitting that we're here to watch the effectively the culmination of the Champions League final, which is the Club World Cup here in Jeddah. And that sort of, and to have that sort of connection, and I never met her, but we swapped a lot of messages, and I sort of helped put her in the right direction of some people at UEFA and the Premier League. And, just to, one of the finest ones, she's very young, sort of mid-20s, but an amazing mind and an amazing personality and soul. And I just think, well, it makes me even more proud of my brother that he was instrumental in helping develop, in a way, these beautiful blossoms into life. He is like a master gardener. And we're very good at gardening in England because of the rain. But that makes me proud. So even though we're not sort of talking, every day, he is, I find him a very inspiring character just to think about, even if I'm not in his presence.
It's refreshing because tolerance is not something that is so evident in the world we live in today.
I agree. We're quite an angry country.
Not just England.
Angry
Not just
world.
England.
I think it's across the world, whether that's a post-COVID thing, whether that's an economic thing, whether that's a rise in extremism in certain areas. I mean, my world is writing in a way about the positives of life. I mean, the sports department of any media organisation is known slightly patronisingly by the news department as the toy department, but it's about man's and woman's achievements, the successes, the bonding, the unity. I mean, I've been to 9 World Cups now, and to see Saudi. I mean, I can remember I covered Saudi Arabia in '94 in Washington with Saeed Al-Wahra.
Yeah.
And I remember I was at the match. I was at a ridiculously hot day in Washington. I remember the office and he said, well, it's Saudi Arabia against Belgium. It won't necessarily be too big for an English market. And so it's a quite well-known Belgian team. He said, well, yeah, if anything happens, I ran and said, I just seen one of the greatest goals of all time. And unfortunately, because I've seen 2 of the greatest 3 goals in FIFA in World Cup history. I didn't see Maradona's second against England. We won't talk about the first, the handball.
Towards the end of it.
We'll get over that in about 40 years. The hand of God.
Hand of God. So when you said you saw one of the best goals in the England in the Belgium side,
Saeed Al-Wahra when he dribbled from the halfway line.
But when you said I just saw that one of the best goals in the Belgium match, people on the other side probably thought that you were talking about Belgium scoring.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it was just this extraordinary. And then I obviously saw Michael Owen's goal against Argentina in '98, which was fantastic. But so the interest in
we had a good team in '94, by the way. Every team since is compared against that one.
Yeah,
many would say. I mean, our performance against Argentina, at least in the second half in the last World Cup, that was a moment of magic. But the '94 team, to lose to Holland 2-1.
By the way, your fans were brilliant in Qatar.
They were
fantastic. I mean, it was a good World Cup. It was a different World Cup. It was a World Cup without police and alcohol.
So
which is new to me.
Which is new and maybe refreshing. But you know how we spoke about briefly. We spoke about like tolerance and how important it is. How come there wasn't any leading up to the Qatar World Cup by way of the BBC choosing not to cover the opening? Like that was a bit.
Yeah, but you have to. Again, this is about understanding and about tolerance. So, absolutely, it should be about tolerance. And in a way, World Cups and tournaments are about people getting together away from the politicians of both sides. So, as an Englishman who believes in a free press, there were issues in Qatar. As an Englishman who believes that everyone has a right to their own sexuality. Human rights obviously was more of an issue in Qatar as well in terms of the treatment of migrant workers. I mean, I went there in 2007 and there were issues then. And then obviously with part of my job as well as working out how English players can take penalties is to liaise with Amnesty, is to liaise with the Qataris. And I went to... I got invited to meet the Emir, I think probably to discuss Western coverage. And again, I think because of sort of my empathy with Islam, because of my respect for my brother, and because of my respect for all religions, but not the extremist side, not the intolerant side. So I had a sort of very brief chat with the Emir in Qatar. And I think the Qataris were slightly upset by the focus of the Western media.
It's the holier than thou's position that bothered me a lot in Western press, telling the Qataris or the Arab world or the Gulf or the Islamic world, you guys need to be okay with homosexuality. You need to be okay with the rainbow flag going. But 20 years ago, you weren't okay with that. 20 years ago, Costa and Starbucks in London in Pride Month wasn't rainbow colors. Now that you're okay with that, you want to inflict that on me and demand that I'm okay with you. Everyone's on their own timeline.
Yeah, but I think that's because we've been on that journey, and I do take your point. And but because we've been on that journey, we, in a way, and I agree, there is an element of holier than thou, particularly not en masse, but I think sort of, individually. And I've definitely been accused of that by the sort of the Qataris and Saudis over my coverage of Newcastle United. I think there's a desire for people to move in a tolerant direction. And I see issues in English society, but I see issues also in Saudi society. I mean, do you have a free press here?
Freer than we ever had.
My general take from a very simple level of someone who is more interested in throw-ins is that the majority of people in the world are good, and I find that in Russia. I have obviously a huge issue with events in the Kremlin and with Putin. And when the Ukrainian Pro League started up, this is a very football approach to world politics, but when that started up, I said to the office when it was, the war had been going on for about 3 months, and Zelensky said, we want the Pro League to go because it's basically giving the finger to the Kremlin and to Putin to show that life goes on here, football goes on, you will never defeat the Ukrainian spirit. So I said to the office, the Ukrainian Pro League is starting up again. I think I might go and cover a match. And they said, that'd be good. And then they realised the logistics of it, and I had to go on hostage awareness training, and I had to be tracked, and I had to have a bodyguard, and I had to have helmets and things like that. But it was really important to go and see the resilience of the Ukrainian people, who were going about their working lives, and then the air raid sirens would go off, and they would go downstairs, and obviously there was no one at the matches apart from one or two daft Western journalists like me. But then, I studied Russian literature, Tolstoy, Turgenev at university. I've travelled around Russia even before going to the World Cup in 2018. And I would say, look, I've not met every Russian, but I would say the majority of people are good. They just want to sort of be like you and me, to have a career, to build a nice house, to have holidays, and to look after our kids and be good role models. And I think the majority of people are like that. But there are dictators, there are extremists, there are one or two religious leaders of all persuasions who actually don't help that, what the majority of people want, which is goodness and calm and peace and sunshine in their lives.
What Western media or Western folks in general painted Russia to be this bad guy. And I remember computer games back in the day, Street Fighter, the last boss was a Russian guy.
Yeah.
USSR, I remember that. They really... I don't know what it is, but I've heard many stories of people going to St. Petersburg back in 2018, and they're saying it was one of the most beautiful cities I've ever been.
Have you ever been?
I've never been, and I want to go to Russia.
I have been. That's the sadness. We probably won't go to again. Certainly not with Putin there. I mean, you go to a place like St. Petersburg. I mean, I do occasional sort of vlogs, and I would go and swim in the river, the Volga, and with my sort of iPhone, talking with my teeth chattering because it was cold even in July. Stupid thing to do, and then filming the Hermitage, the museum on the far side, and they say, if you're going to go to the Hermitage, give yourself a day, give yourself a week. I mean, you go in there, and it's just the most stunning building, as well as the art there. It's off the scale. Yeah. So again, on a very simplistic level, how can a country that has produced some of the world's best chess players, best ballerinas, best musicians, there's just best writers, best poets, have such a cultural soul and cultural, depth? How can they all be? They can't all be that bad. So I take this view of the world that it's good people and a few bad leaders. So is this a microphone that my brother used?
Little housekeeping, yes.
Yeah, I think this is
the exact one.
You know what? I think you should have actually retired it. I think it's like
put it in a frame,
like a holy relic or something. This should be on a museum. There should be a museum in Jeddah, which would be like, it should be like behind the behind glass, like a Leonardo da Vinci classic. This is honestly. I just wish it would actually take my words and just reassemble them in a more elegant form.
It's become an artifact. You should have signed the headphones as well while he was at it.
Absolutely, yeah. So, just sort of coming back to your point, I think the world is full of good people and some bad leaders. And coming back to your points which is one of the reasons why you've asked me here, about the bad Western media. There's a lot of good in the Western media. I mean, look, we come here and the Western media will go to countries and will go to Qatar and talk about the good things. But remember, we shine a light on the bad things in English society. We don't let our politicians get away with things. We don't let certain members of our royal families get away with. So we scrutinize our leaders probably more than you scrutinize yours.
I think I honestly...
True?
What, that?
Yeah.
That part? You guys are very tough on your people,
Yeah.
for sure. I also think that we love, since we're talking about leadership, don't discredit how much we love our leadership. People think that, we live in this fear. We love our... Now, have you ever been here on September 23rd?
No.
Look at the streets. I think I honestly believe we celebrate National Day probably as best as a country on earth has celebrated National Day. I don't think there's anyone up there with us when it comes to celebrating National Day.
Sorry, every country is patriotic. Have you been to Brazil when they're playing football? I would say that about the English. I would say about these. Have you been in Italy?
Can I challenge that?
Go on. Sorry, you're saying that the Saudi people are more patriotic than anyone else.
I'm saying
Australia when they're playing rugby or they're playing England at cricket.
Again, I'm saying celebration of the flag, National Day,
well,
not the sport. There's a bit of it. There's nuances there.
It's the shirt.
The football, as opposed to celebrating Flag Day or just the birthday of the nation is one thing. Following or supporting the football team, they're two slightly different things. Can we not agree on that?
Well, no, I think mainly because I look at things through a footballing and sporting perspective. It is, they've always said sport is war without the bullets. There is absolutely the Olympics and football, the World Cup is all about patriotism. Why do some players, some countries perform better for their country than they do individually for their clubs? Because of that national, Pele. Can many people actually name? Well, a lot of people can name who Pele played for at club level, obviously Santos. But he is so embedded in Brazilian life, in Brazilian, and that's woven into. So, taking your point, I think the flag and the shirt, the sporting shirt, they're on a par.
In the US, in NFL, did you catch this story a year or two ago? I'm sure you have. Sure. I'm not about to teach you anything about sports. The knee that these NFL players would take during national anthem. So you're upset at the politics, at the policies of what the flag represents right now. But if there's a U.S. men's soccer team, you're going to support the team. So they're kind of two different things, I think. But please correct me if my thinking is wrong.
No, I'm not correcting you at all. The whole taking the knee debate rose. It goes back to Martin Luther King, if we want to take it, to its original genesis. It arose because of police brutality.
Yes.
Again, coming back to our essential debate, which is where you and I share the same page, is a dislike of intolerance, and the racial tensions that still exist in parts of America manifest itself. And I write a lot about the young English, a very empowered generation of England footballers, Marcus Rashford, Raheem Sterling, who've done huge good. We talk about sort of the issues in other countries, but actually Marcus Rashford went and fed the kids of this country when Boris Johnson wouldn't. And I was talking this was all about pre-school meals. So obviously a lot of people, their parents can't afford, literally, it's crazy, we live in this world, but couldn't afford to give their kids a proper breakfast before they went to school, and that obviously affects them. How can they concentrate in classes? Whereas Marcus Rashford, Manchester United in England, because he had benefited from free school meals, they're called, as a kid, he was determined that should sort of continue, and he took on Boris Johnson. And I remember talking to some people around the time, this is just pre-COVID, talking to some of the people in 10 Downing Street, where Boris Johnson was Prime Minister at the time, and just saying, you're not going to beat Marcus Rashford because he's very empowered. There's a reason for this story. And so the good that he did, and then Raheem Sterling on racism, because, the parts of English society where there is still elements of racism, sadly, we're particularly seeing it on social media, which can be a sewer at times. So that England generation, it's fantastic, and they were taking the knee. And the reason why, unfortunately, in England, debate got blurred between the Black Lives Matter movement as a political movement, defunding the police, and Black Lives Matter as a principle. And, white lives matter, black lives matter, everyone lives matter. So when the England players started taking the knee, I thought it was really good. They got booed at, but actually increasingly people accepted and understood what the point they were trying to make, the acceptance that there should be more tolerance. Coming back to our central debate, which is what your podcast is about, it is about a plea for tolerance.
Tolerance, absolutely. Did England faced a bit of a racial issue or tension? I think it was the Euros when the 3 black players just so happened to miss the bloody penalties. How was that taken in the press and the populace? Was there a bit of...
absolutely went after those who'd racially abused them. Everyone in the country did. And it was... There can't be anything uplifting coming out of that because it was absolutely brutal, because we know the 3 individuals, Jadon Sancho, Bukayo Saka and Marcus Rashford.
Yeah. Superstars.
Yeah, and Rashford had it before, and I know Marcus quite well, and I had been sent the private messages that he got sent. And so everyone knew that, because you could see on the timelines the sort of the abuse that he was getting. And I got sent it was just string of monkey emojis.
Brutal, huh?
It was just, and voice messages as well. And you just think, are there really people like that in this society? And then, so there are many different lines of attack that you go into when you want to stand up for people. And in this case was to call on the social media companies to actually show some responsibility, to call on the government to clamp down on the social media companies who are making money in this country and elsewhere, and not actually showing any desire to clamp down properly on hate crime, which that what it was. And then you found the country, just because I think the English as a country, British, is actually quite a compassionate country. Again, coming back to people as opposed to leadership, because we don't have a particularly good leadership at the moment, and I'm allowed to criticise as a journalist in England.
You are. I didn't mean to nod.
Yeah. No, it's right. Yeah, but it's true. We got some hopeless politicians on all sides for many reasons. But the family enveloped and wrapped those 3 young kids in their warmth. And do you know that one of the many sadnesses of that day, because it was a dreadful occasion on and off the pitch, but you just knew, the first 2 players who took the penalties were white. And if they'd missed, they'd get a bit of stick. But you just knew and we've had this debate in English football about black players taking penalties. So look, we as journalists, as a media, we cast a light on the issues that we have in society that, from my perspective, affect the national team, because I write a lot about England. And writing about England is also quite an interesting window onto the soul and the state of England. But actually it was quite uplifting wherever you went, the reaction, the support for those 3. And when Bukayo Saka warmed up at Brentford, the first game of the following season, when he warmed up, and the rivalry between English clubs. Okay, Brentford, they're not exactly a bunch of, hooligans or whatever. They're all quite so respectable. But their love for him was huge. And when he came on, their love for him was huge. And
Brentford is the London team, West London, yeah?
Yeah.
The Premier League, yes.
Yeah. Not quite as big as Chelsea.
No.
But
which we're going to get into.
Which we'll get into. Yeah, that's where you go and lie down.
Lovely little stadium for a team that just got promoted. I see it on the way from Heathrow.
Stadium. Yeah. Unbelievable stadium. The way they tucked that in there. It's basically, for your listeners, it's effectively on a railway siding, and they managed to squeeze it in there. And one of the great things is, and I know you've been to the Metropolitano, but when clubs move ground, you can lose the atmosphere. But because, when you went to see Atletico Madrid, their old ground was fantastic. It was ramshackle. It should have been pulled down. It was a health hazard. But the atmosphere in there was brilliant. Again, it comes back to a central argument. Everything comes back to people.
Yeah.
Everything comes back to compassion and tolerance. Yeah. But so in terms of those 3, and I know we got the English society, everyone said, oh, you're being holier than thou, you're always having a go at others, but look at what's going on. Actually, the English media was totally, as absolutely they should be, partly because we know them as individuals and partly because it was wrong. There was such anger to the way they were treated.
So the media protected.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we have done for quite a few years. I can remember it's sad, one of the sad parts of the job, but I've been in Bulgaria where the racists there were abusing English players, and I was talking to the England players afterwards and said, why don't you walk off? because at some point, we're such a multicultural, multi-faith society, actually. And while I like, if I open the England dressing room door, I see what I want society to look like. I see all cultures, all faiths, everyone pulling in the same direction. Tolerance, good people. I think that is so important. But sadly, I've seen England players racially abused all over. In Real Madrid, when England played there at the Bernabeu, one of the great arenas of English football, and then we sat. Was it 2003 or 4? Ashley Cole got racially abused. Sean Wright-Phillips got racially abused. Black players racially abused. And the referee didn't do anything. The stewards didn't do anything. And we spoke to the Spanish coach afterwards, and he said, Spain played well. And he said, well, aren't you ashamed of your players? So I think, just coming back to your central point about the Western media, I think we do stand up for certain things. And I think we can nudge things in a certain direction, in a good direction, domestically and abroad. But I agree. I agree there is an element of arrogance about telling other countries how to live their lives. But I think we've been on certain journeys, and we have not necessarily a right to do it, but certainly some experience to do it.
Also, one bad journalist, and it's almost like he represents the entire industry. I think it was Gary Lineker who took a stance against Qatar, and he's obviously high profile, and people in our region were like, British press, throwing the World Cup under the bus before it even started. Give us a chance.
Well, so there are two elements with Qatar. First, I was there involved in the bidding process, and I saw the way that Qatar won it, and they didn't win it fairly. I think everyone accepts that. I think if you actually look at the amount of people at FIFA who've left since that decision, and FIFA's attempts to actually try and improve it, FIFA's not exactly the world's great moral institution. It's all about money. It's all about greed. It's all about personality and politics.
Blatter was in hot water.
Blatter was in hot water, and then obviously he got moved on. I don't think FIFA has necessarily improved that much. I think there's a little bit more accountability now, but the way that Qatar got it for a tournament that couldn't be played in the summer there, and it's an interesting debate and I've had a chat with a few people out here about when you host the World Cup here. I know it's slightly cooler in this region than Qatar, which is so brutal in June, July. But whether it will be another sort of November, December World Cup, it'll be interesting. So I'm all for sharing the World Cup around the world. I think absolutely there's no reason why the first world footballing countries, in inverted commas, those who founded and codified it, like the English, like Germany, should automatically have it just because we've got the big stadium and we've got the sort of history and whatever. I think it's one of the best things in the world, taking the World Cup. The World Cup, by its very name, belongs to the world. So again, it should be shared around. But yeah, Qatar deserved the criticism because of the migrant workers, the way they were treated, because there were concerns about English gay fans, whether they could actually, what would happen to them if they walked down the Corniche in Doha holding hands, which is just normal life. No one even notices that.
Men hold hands in Saudi well before homosexuality was accepted in the UK.
Good.
Men hold hands.
Yeah. But is that a sexual thing? Or is that just
it's not. It's a cultural thing.
It's a cultural
As
thing.
they walk, they hold hands.
Yeah.
Very, very normal.
No, fine. But I'm sort of talking about, would a gay couple have that license?
I mean, I think a question was posed to one of the Qatari officials, and he said, we're a country of tolerance. No one's going to ask you, what your sexual preference or orientation is. So long as you're being respectful and you're dressed accordingly, you're okay. I think it was the rainbow flag specifically that was said no to, and thus that's where the media ate it up.
Yeah, but that was pure politics on Infantino's part. I mean, Infantino is good people go into FIFA and change. Again, coming back to my central point, the majority of people are good, but I think organizations, institutions, power can change people, and not for the better. But absolutely, Qatar deserved the criticism, and it shouldn't have been there. And actually, my argument at the time was that actually, wouldn't it have been fantastic if it had been a Gulf World Cup? Because I think you'd know this better than I would, but there were issues between competing Gulf nations. There were huge issues, whether it was over broadcast and beIN and some of the sort of the illegal broadcasting and the tensions between the country. I think a Gulf World Cup would have been absolutely fantastic because it might have brought parts of the region together, as well as taken the focus away from Qatar, who bought the World Cup.
جديد اكسر الروتين مع أطباقنا الجديدة من بيتزا هات جدة. بيتزا هات جدة ذوق طعم الثقة معنا.
My friends who went said it was a little too tight to house 8 stadiums within an hour from one end to the other, which actually some said that was, you actually want to experience the country, and some said it's actually great because I could catch, if I want to, 3 matches in one day.
Yeah. England fans are obsessed with football. I mean, they were just. I mean, I had one friend who I think did 48 of the 54.
Oh wow!
You could get around. I mean, I did I drove everywhere, which is. I mean, your roads are lively here, but Qatar is just. Although your roundabouts here, I'm going.
We are the kings of roundabouts.
You are the kings of roundabouts, but it's a bit like being caught in a very, very complicated, high-speed, rather drunk Scottish country dance, where everyone is going in different directions, normally to the bar. But it's absolute. I love your roundabouts, but I'm almost sort of hiding down behind the wheel. Anyway,
you'd be disappointed to know that we're phasing them out. So there's
the
about,
roundabouts.
Yeah, there's about maybe 10 major ones left in Jeddah, as opposed to 100 10 years ago. So they've been phased out. They've now been bridges or flyovers or traffic lights.
And U-turns.
And U-turns, yeah, we do
U-turns. You could do U-turns. You love a U-turn.
Yeah.
And I'm going, oof.
Especially ones that merge with traffic going 120.
Yeah. I mean, I've driven in Rio and I've driven in LA, and I have to say, I think you go into my top 5 lively drivers.
Yeah.
You should produce some great Formula One drivers here, because the way you weave in and out. Plus, also, you're not short of petrol.
There's that, and the element of us not being into the open wheel racing just yet. You know, NASCAR. I always said NASCAR would do well because it looks like something that's on the road.
Yeah, that's true.
F1 might be, too sophisticated for our petrol heads.
Yeah. Haven't you had a
Formula One?
Formula One?
3.
You've had 3.
Yeah.
There you go.
And every year, you'd be happy to know this as a sports journalist. Every year, there's more butts in seats. It's filling up.
Good.
Yeah,
good,
which is great.
Talking of which, that was disappointing for the semi-final with Manchester City.
I noticed. In the expensive areas, yeah? The VIP was a bit low on numbers.
Yeah, but, if and there were blocks there, and my argument with blocks, and we occasionally get it, not in the Premier League, but occasionally get it at 1 or 2 matches, give it to local school kids.
Yeah.
Give it to, I don't know if everyone has to be in bed at a certain time, but I mean, you just get a whole class at school and say, right, you're going on tonight.
So the cheaper seats, the ones that are in the camera view, center cam view, that was full.
Yeah, okay.
It's the box. If you saw where the box was, which is probably over £500-600 for a seat, and which is why I wanted Etihad. If we didn't get spanked out of the blue, and we were heavily favored, by the way.
Yeah.
Ahli Masri were 5-1 as winners, and we were like 1.5-1.
Yeah.
And I noticed
you're allowed to bet here.
You're not allowed to bet here.
Right.
I just checked on FootMob. You actually have the thing that tells you what is the likelihood, and I wanted to see it from a neutral, and no better neutral than a betting house.
Yeah.
So I said 1.5. It had to win, and the others were 5. I went to the match, and we just got punched in the mouth. And Benzema was off his game that day, and then he missed a penalty, and 2 goals down in front of your home crowds. The defense and the midfield they just give up.
Yeah.
It ended up 3-1. But if it was Etihad against Man City yesterday, or the day before, you wouldn't have seen an empty seat.
No.
Which is important for the local team to advance.
I get that, but also it has to be about sporting pedigree and ability.
Of course.
But also, I think as you are engaged in a PR war, it's too strong a word, but a PR campaign to convince people you're a footballing nation who is worthy of hosting the World Cup in 2034. That was a bad look.
Even though it was 40,100 people?
Well, 96, there were a few seats empty then. There was absolute outrage. Because also...
Euro 96, yeah?
Yeah, Euro 96, yeah. So particularly with Premier League ticket prices being high, when you see empty seats, whether it's corporate, whether it's no-shows, you just go, there's a kid who is literally outside with his face pressed up against the glass like a sort of Dickensian orphan. Wanting to go in there, wanting to be part of the dream. And this is a general thing with football. Maybe it's slightly tied in with our central conversation of good people, is that football and this is definitely a criticism that can be directed at the English, is being slightly taken away from working class, a bit patronising, and it's a sort of disparate group now, but actually the traditional fans. So when you do get a chance to fill a ground, fill it.
Especially if you're not going to show the 3 o'clock games on a Saturday.
Oh wow!
Can we go there? Or?
You can, absolutely. I mean,
what's that about? I mean,
okay, right. The finals on Friday. I've got Christmas on Monday. I've then got 14 matches over the holiday period. It will probably take me about 2 weeks to explain the vagaries of the English football system. So 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon was traditionally there so factory workers could go to the game and work hard during the week. So part of the Industrial Revolution.
Which is on its last leg.
Which is on it, yes, because we're moving into the media age, as you're showing me with your very impressive studio with lights and cameras and very expensive microphones, which should have been retired, or because my brother has graced its presence.
Do you know that Michael Jackson recorded Thriller on these Shure mics? They're a 30-year-old technology. No, I wish here. Right. Then I would really close down the studio.
Yeah.
Not to take anything away from your brother, but these
you do have an off-the-wall program.
Sorry?
You do have an off-the-wall program.
What does that mean?
Sorry, that's a Michael Jackson joke. Sorry.
My siblings are going to laugh at me for not getting that one. But these mics, as modern as they look, they aren't. They're about 30 years old. How about that?
Are they?
Yeah.
Wow. But these are brilliant, these mics.
Yeah. They're great. You hear everything. Yeah. The quality is just... I literally saw what Rogan uses to record, and I didn't decide to go anywhere else.
No.
Just go to try to
test top it. Man.
Yeah. You'd have to be in the Gulf to watch Brentford versus Brighton if that whets your palate on a Saturday at 3 p.m.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of keeping the 3 p.m. free of televised games in the UK, of the elite games, is so that it doesn't affect the tendencies of clubs down the pyramid.
Okay, so that was the strategy behind it.
So Chelsea, they wouldn't want their Chelsea game shown at 3 o'clock because... live, because it might affect Fulham when they were not in the same division, their attendance if they were playing at 3 o'clock. Having said that, they wouldn't, because the police wouldn't allow them to play at the same time anyway.
So if they showed it on TV,
you can't show a 3 o'clock game.
I know you can't, but in a world, let's hypothetically say that if Sky Sports had 10 different channels and one for each, whatever, if you had access to it the way NBA has NBA League Pass, if they had that facility available for purchase, would that affect the attendance of matches?
Well, this is a huge debate about whether it affects it. I mean, you know what we're like in England? You've got 92 professional clubs, and probably half the National League are pretty much professional. People are so passionate, so tribal. You know, I mean, one of the worst things you can do in England is to say, I used to be a Chelsea fan, but now I'm a Manchester United fan. You cannot change. You know, in life you can change your job, you can change your partner, you cannot change your club. That's a slightly simplistic football way of looking at life, but I think it's true. So coming back to the 3 o'clock, this is really technical stuff. But the irony is that effectively the decision won't have to be taken, because Sky, with a new television contract, they have so many games on Sunday. They'll have games on Friday night. They'll have games at 12:30 UK time on a Saturday and in the evening. That actually there'll probably only be 1 or 2 games that kick off at the traditional time at 3 o'clock on a Saturday. So kind of that argument is slightly going.
Probably pisses off the players if they're not on the game that's shown on TV. Everyone wants to be shown. Everyone wants to showcase.
Yeah.
Everyone's a brand. Players are now our brands, aren't they?
They are, but all the games. I mean, I wrote a book on England about sort of 7-8 years ago, and I spent a sort of slightly lively day in a pub in Santa Monica and in California, just watching game after game after game, which you can do. You
Fox, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I think it might have been NBC or Fox. Yeah, one of the two. Yeah. Probably Fox.
Yeah.
And you know, it was huge. Absolutely, there would be an appetite. But I mean, I was in here in a cafe round the corner from here, and I was watching a rerun of Brentford against Aston Villa, and I was just coming back to your point about players as a brand. They're global anyway. They know their matches are being shown around the world, and you see it. I mean, Manchester City, when they arrive here, you know, the reception they get, or wherever they go around the world, and they're with Manchester City, not yet. You know, they're not in Liverpool or Manchester United's league in terms of global appeal. But yeah, players, and it's interesting, players, it's becoming very much player shaped in terms of the younger generation are following players more. So Ronaldo leaves Manchester United, their numbers go down. He joins, he comes out to Saudi, their numbers go up. So, he's huge.
Great case study, that. Would you like to witness a world where
excuse me.
No problem. Would you like to see the day where consumers have the option to purchase a match to watch if it's not televised, instead of waiting for match of the day, end of the day?
The majority of matches you can, pretty much. I mean, it's probably about 2/3 of the next television deal that you can watch live. I think ultimately, that's what the Glazers were hoping for. That's what a lot of the American owners were hoping for, that they could actually stream their games live. And their argument is, why should we split the television money fairly equitably between 20 clubs who, some of them are corner shops and some of them are one of your famous 350 shopping malls, much sort of bigger. So, yeah, I can see that. But then the strange thing about the Premier League is it's a celebration of capitalism, but it actually runs slightly on communist lines in terms of the sharing around of the profits and the revenue. And it works because if you strengthen the weakest team, they might give the league leader a bloody nose. That's great. That adds to the sporting jeopardy, and that's why it's the best sporting league in the world, let alone football league in the world, because on any given day you could have an ambush.
Are you for the draft system and how? Because I'm a big NBA fan, and I see how the NBA, have given the opportunity for consumers to pay. I think it's down to like £4 or £5 if you just want to buy a single game or a league pass. So you have the option there, and I think options in life is better than no options. But I'll come back to the options and why I think that every game should be allowed in the UK. Do you think the draft system, whereby it allows the worst team to one day be the best team by way of the draft, makes it more exciting? Or do you want the Arsenal, Man U, Man United, Chelsea, Liverpool to be the top 5 forever?
We had Leicester City 5,000 to 1.
One in a million.
You're getting.
I love the story. I respect that.
Yeah.
For sure. But like, when was the last one before that? Blackburn in '99.
Yeah, 95. Yeah, and they had, they had financial backing. I think we should all be allowed to dream. I agree with that. But look, you look at Manchester City at the moment. Obviously, whenever you write about Manchester City and whenever you talk to people there, you have to mention the 115 financial charges that have been levelled at them, which they deny, but financial breaches, shortcuts.
Are consequences coming from that? Because I keep hearing about it, but then, everything seems to be business as usual.
Don't stand by your phone.
Okay.
It's going to be. I don't think you'll be having Pep in here on a podcast bemoaning.
Not anytime soon.
But bemoaning relegation to the grassroots league on the edge of Manchester. Yeah.
Is that the potential repercussions that they get?
Yeah, and it'd be one of the biggest sporting stories of all time. Wow. But again, that's because of the lawyers, the power of lawyers. Again, taking the game away from the people who it really should be about, the fans and the players. That's being dragged probably into the long grass of late next year. So, that's frustrating.
I bring it up because I was bred in England, and it's a part of me. London is one of my favorite cities, irrespective of what the crime rate looks like today.
Can I say another media myth?
Is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a friend who came over from America, works in MLS, and he said, "Where's safe to go in London?" I said, "It's one of the safest cities in the world."
The amount of people who I know had their phones nicked and watches ripped off and knife crime. It's on.
No.
Really?
I would be amazed. My kids go out partying in London, and look, there's crime in all cities, but I wouldn't put London in the top 10 most dangerous cities. What I would say is because of social media and Medium, because we have no problems in writing about. I write. Arsenal have got an amazing scheme about knife crime, and I think, was it last year, 30 people in London died from knife crime. And I don't know how that compares with an American city, but I can't imagine you don't feel there's a crime wave going on in London. You can get on the tube late at night. I've never had any. I've been chased a couple of times in London, but
it's probably about an article you wrote.
Yeah, I do get that a lot. Angry Arsenal fans saying, "Why are you so nasty to Arsene Wenger?"
I would never compare it against an American city that's in a league of its own with the crime there. But I'm kind of semi-relieved that you're saying it's just propaganda that's happening.
It's not propaganda. It's just ill-informed. Because I mean, you go to London now. London is packed with tourists.
Yeah, packed.
Because of the I think post-COVID, everyone wants to come now. People are ready to come back.
Americans, it's unbelievable how many Americans.
Yeah, well, it's great. It's great for business. It's great
Yeah.
for West End. My wife's an actress, so the fact that the theatres are absolutely
Packed.
rammed
Yeah.
to capacity, and you get people walking out of theatres and walking to the tube and managing to get home without getting mugged. So anyone on your podcast, you're safe. But look, you don't go out with a flashy watch.
And
where you know,
true.
I've got a cheap watch there. I've got a nice
Swatch.
watch. It's just a like $70 watch, which I wear whenever I go to Champions League games, when I'm traveling Europe, when whatever. And I've got a sort of nicer watch, which I'll wear at home for special occasions. You don't wander around with a big camera around your neck saying
your wits about you.
Yeah. I mean, it's traveling 101.
Another thing that came to mind when I was talking about Americans in London, baseball has really brought in an element. I remember it was 2 years ago, 3, when you had the two biggest teams, the Liverpool, Manchester United. You had the Red Sox against the Yankees.
Yeah.
I think it was 2 or 3 matches there. Where was it? It was in the West Ham,
Yeah.
City of London State.
Which is what it's good for, because it's not a soccer,
it's
it's
the
not
oval.
A football, so
Yeah.
it's terrible. Yeah, it's shocking, because it was an athletic stadium. They should have knocked it down.
They should have. Is it still? It's still West Ham's home ground. Yeah.
Yeah.
The distance between the bench and the touchline is just way more than we're used to.
Do you know what, we because we're cheeky in the media, when they opened it, we actually told the West Ham fans that if any of you can have pitch invasions, you're going to have to get fit, because it's a long way to the pitch.
Yes, no matter how bad our security are as tacklers. Something really upsetted me over the summer, and I can understand why. Simon Jordan and BBC just laid into us about Newcastle. And I know it was the summer season and it was slow, but every day for 6 months, it was about Saudi. They have no right getting all those players.
But no one really took Simon Jordan seriously on that, because Premier League have been licking players from France and wherever. So, you know, one opinionated, I know Simon, he's a very good broadcaster. But, you know, one opinionated broadcaster doesn't reflect the mood of the people. Everyone was saying, actually, most people were happy with Saudi because they were taking off some of the players that we were offloading for good money.
He wasn't. And last time I checked, it's free market. So if you're not going to pay this guy X, how about, kind of like with Liv? Well, how about I pay him a little bit more, maybe what he deserves, but it's a free market. So it was.
No, I think Liv was slightly different. I'm sort of my golfing knowledge is very limited, but
they overpaid.
Liv. Well, the money with Liv threatened the fabric of the sport. Okay. The money from the Saudi Pro League absolutely helped out the English clubs with financial fair play, because you were overpaying for players who we were going, we'll drive them to the airport, some of them. So,
and maybe Liv is something we can get into.
But out in Qatar, when I had to go and see the Emir, we went to the Waldorf Astoria. And it was a very civilized Arabic way of saying, we'd quite like to talk to you. And this is our invitation. So it wasn't, in England, it would be, let's go and have, you know, tea with the Prime Minister at the Ritz or the Savoy. It was, let's go and play paddle at the Waldorf Astoria. And my paddle partner was Simon Jordan. And he's so competitive, he said, don't let me down. And I said, I'll be listening to you for long enough. I would love to let you down, but no, we didn't. We won. We had to play some Qataris, and then I got to meet the very, very tall Emir. He's tall.
6'4".
Is he 6'4"? Wow.
Yeah. Very tall.
Should be more into basketball than football. But anyway, so back to Simon Jordan, who is, I mean, he loves football, and he always fancied himself as a footballer.
Not happy that Saudi, okay, we bought ourselves into this.
Okay.
But you're not...
This is one person shouting.
Yeah, on a very big mic.
Okay, on a very big mic, but you know, we have a huge media in this country. Yeah. So yeah, look, his program is very well followed. His podcast is good, and he's very opinionated. But that was one person's view.
Mm. And then he threw in the Newcastle thing and buying the club, but it wasn't a problem when City was bought by Abu Dhabi. I didn't hear a fuss when the Qatari jumped on PSG. Mind you, that was France. Or when Emirates, I don't think Emirates own any equity in Arsenal, but they're all over Arsenal. But all of a sudden, when we buy Newcastle, a team that, you know, not many people were thinking of before the sale, for a very, I think, undervalued £305 million.
Unbelievable bit of business.
Brilliant business. All of a sudden, it's chaotic, and states should not own equity or own any football teams, or ruining the game and all that, and just throwing it under the bus. And then he was asked if he'd accept the job to head the Saudi League, and to which he said yes.
Oh, did he? Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
So that's when it all came crashing down.
Yeah. Well, that's Simon would be. I think there'd be one or two people who drive him to the airport.
What do you think of the Newcastle?
So I've been consistent on this from the word go.
Yep.
I had a huge issue with the previous owner, Mike Ashley, because he was draining the life and the love out of the club. And Newcastle is not just a club which relies on its emotional connection and the fans, but it's a city, it's a region, which is, because it's far from London, they feel a bit unloved. Economically, they've had issues there, but it's such a brilliant, vibrant city. It's probably the number one city in the country, well, the UK, that people want to go to for the university. And when the team's doing well, they have a 10% increase of applications from overseas, because it's a party town, but also when the team's doing well, it's just a special place. But when the team's doing poorly and the fans think there isn't a pride in the Newcastle shirt, it just casts a cloud over the whole place. I mean, the shirt's black and white, and everyone looks through life in black and white. I mean, it's a slight cliche, but it's true. And Mike didn't just, he's not a Newcastle fan. He's a businessman, and it just needed love. It needed some, tender loving care. So, Newcastle fans would have sold out to anyone.
He wasn't popular towards the end of his days.
He wasn't popular from the start. Because of you would go there, you look at the training ground, it was a bit shabby, it needed some investment. You looked at the delays in players' contracts. So success tends to mask and move on many agendas. And you look at the club now, the way it's been handled is an absolute masterclass in soft management, in terms of appointing the right people, whether that was Eddie Howe, whether that was getting Kieran Trippier from Atletico Madrid, an absolute winner. Had a bit of a nightmare last night, but he's just, everyone was expecting, they're going to go for Messi, they're going to go for Mbappe, and I was writing at the time, said they would be daft to go for that. It's evolution. So PIF, the Saudis, absolutely, the way they have handled it. But I think people do understand, maybe it's partly for investment, as you say quite rightly, that they've got it an absolute steal. It'll be worth $1 billion now. Probably. But it is all about changing the image of the Saudis in the Western eye. So it's quite interesting, you talk about the sort of Western media. Saudis obviously at elite level, high level, are concerned about their image in the West, whether it's, you'd know more about this than I would, whether it's this 2030 vision and you're trying to change the view, trying to get more tourists here. You get more sporting events here, and sport is a great way of getting directly to people and say, we're the same as you, we love sport. And they are getting Newcastle fans dreaming again.
To be honest, so much reflection to what you just said. There was a time not too long ago, 5-6 years ago, where we actually cared about how we'd be perceived. And it's gotten to the point where we felt that we are able to compete in hosting these world-class events, albeit, I understand the semi-final had 40,106 fans there, but nevertheless, we feel that we can compete if it's Dakar, if it's F1. If you told me 10 years ago, Mo, do you think Saudi can host an F1? I'd say no.
What, in terms of your organisation?
In terms of, we didn't have the blueprint or the know-how or the skill set to close down a couple of kilometers in our Corniche to plop a track over there. Like it's going to be a shit show. I would imagine streakers running across the track, after the flag goes. But all of a sudden, it's like, shit, we are capable actually to do this. So the validation-seeking element isn't as prominent as you might think it is. To be very honest with you, I'm not trying to sing our praises. We're maybe not so good in many things, but what I've noticed today is that we couldn't care less what you think of us, because we feel that we can compete with you guys. And maybe beating Argentina probably went to our heads a little too much. Sure. But there was a lot of validation seeking 5-10 years ago. What would the West think of us? People ask me, you started your English Saudis, you started your English podcast, you want to impress the West? I was like, no, there's 5 times more English speaking people in the world than Arabic, and I'm better as an English speaker than an Arabic speaker. So that's why, excuse me, but that's why I started my podcast. I'm not trying to impress anyone. I'm just trying to show,
I think you have an intelligent monarchy. You have intelligent people there who know that it's absolutely makes sense to get on the West from economic perspective. But also, I think every country wants to be liked by other countries. It makes sense on a simple human level and makes sense on a simple economic level. You want tourists to come to this country. I mean, I look at some of the parts of Saudi Arabia and I think this is just incredible. Some of the valleys and the sort of, the perception in the West is that it's a desert with some skyscrapers and oil wells everywhere. Whereas actually...
And dangerous. Many people think it's very dangerous.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm not sure the English people would. I think they think that it's actually...
More so the Americans, maybe. Oh my God, Saudi Arabia. I know it from like the trainers that come to Saudi, those in the fitness business. You're going to go to Saudi Arabia? I have my old trainer, Bill, from Tennessee. Oh my God, like his family were so against moving here. And when he came back for Christmas, they were like, we thought we'd never see you again.
Right.
He's like, I never lock my car in Saudi Arabia, you know? And here, if I lock my car, I might never see it again.
Yeah. The only time I felt any danger is being on one of your roundabouts.
That's it.
So close those down.
Which we're phasing out.
Close down and you'll be even safer than Switzerland.
Yes.
You'll be Switzerland with sand.
That's pushing it. But
Yeah. You're probably wealthier. But yeah, in terms of... I think everyone wants to be liked.
Yeah.
And I think it does make sense. I mean, if I understand the Vision 2030 correctly, it is about opening up.
Yeah.
And that would imply that they're unhappy with their image. And I like your bullish stance about we don't care because we can organise. Absolutely you can organise, but also you're intelligent enough to know to get... if you host a Formula One race, you will get the best British engineers, the best broadcasters who are from America, from France, from Holland, from the UK in. The world's a smaller place. Yeah. People move around. Sports events, you've got a big boxing event on this. You'll hear English voices running it, American voices. So, and that is a travelling roadshow that goes around and they'll come to Saudi Arabia. But I think you need to change... Again, I don't want to come over as a Western journalist, but I think it's because I have an empathy with the country because of my brother. I want to see you regarded more highly in the West, and I would say you've got intelligent leadership, and it makes sense. Because still, would I, as a tourist, come to Saudi Arabia? I would. The safety thing isn't an issue.
Yeah.
Absolutely not an issue. But if I look at some of the beauty of your hinterland, I think I would if I had a more emotional connection with Saudi Arabia. But I think that is coming.
Question for you. Do you want to see the country, Saudi Arabia, do something special? Would you like to see 2034 World Cup hosted in Saudi?
On the simple level of rotation around the world, I would rather it have gone to Australia.
Australia.
Yeah, because they haven't had it.
Did they bid for it?
I think they withdrew when they realised who they were up against and when they saw Infantino getting on the first flight to Jeddah. And
so they were worried that Saudi would get it anyway for whatever reason, so it's not even worth a bid.
It can cost quite a lot to bid to get the whole thing, and they thought, oof. And they just hosted a very successful Women's World Cup with New Zealand. I thought that was sad. I like seeing, going to Japan and South Korea, the World Cup there was fantastic, and it made a change for
2002.
Yeah, that was just...
Was it a good one?
It was fantastic, because when we go to tournaments, and maybe it's a sort of English media thing, because we're nosy and we're curious and we're fascinated about exploring, is we want to celebrate the country. You couldn't really celebrate Qatar, because there was, obviously there were all the issues, the way they got it, the human rights, the LGBT issue.
The execution, the stadiums,
the stadiums were fantastic.
Atmosphere in the matches.
The atmosphere was good, and you see that's what we do in the Western media. Is that I don't have anyone telling me what to write. I mean, I've been doing this for 7 years, and no one has ever once told me what to write. So absolutely, what we do is we're weathermen. If it's raining, we say it's raining. If it's sunny, we say it's sunny. So you go to Qatar, and because I'm the son of an architect, and because I've always enjoyed Islamic Moorish architecture, having travelled around the south of Spain, and just seeing some of the buildings there, some of the stadiums were just absolutely stunning. Again, some of the banks, or whatever they were, on the Corniche in Doha. Again, absolutely stunning.
Lusail specifically, the
Lusail
big boy.
was just stunning.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just beautiful. I mean, it was a very difficult moment because when a lot of us were going to the final, we just lost one of our colleagues who died suddenly, very famous, Grant Varr, very famous American writer, worked for Sports Illustrated.
God, I remember that story.
It was just terrible because we were all such friends with him, and
What was
we'd all been.
What was the reason of death?
It was
Cause of death?
It's a very, very complicated phraseology, and I don't want to disrespect him by getting the name wrong, but it was something to do with his heart, and it was very sudden, and he died in front of some of our colleagues who tried to bring round, and you're not just trying to bring round a complete random stranger, you're trying to bring round someone who you know his wife. And it was very emotional heading to the final. I mean, I'm a fairly stoic character, but I remember just hearing the news, and I was doing something for the BBC, which is separate from TalkSport, and just going live on there. And just before I went live on there, they said, "Do you mind if we ask you about Grant?" And I found it really difficult to talk about because we were very close. And when you see someone and you've been talking to him 24 hours ago about have you got your mixed zone allocation and just little tiny things like that. So that was very emotional because we're a tight knit bunch with all the other sort of journalists. And I don't know too many of the Saudi Arabian journalists. I know quite a few of the African journalists, obviously having covered the World Cup in 2010 down in South Africa, yeah, and the Americans, and we're good mates, and so that was quite an emotional. I don't think that affected our view of the World Cup. I don't think it was.
Yeah, it would have happened anywhere.
Professional, yeah.
No.
But it was just, it was difficult.
What was your issue specifically? If I would say, like, what would have you liked to see that you haven't?
It's not a football country.
Not a football country.
So I come to Saudi Arabia.
Yep.
No, it's a football country
Okay,
because of what I saw in '94 and what I heard from your fans. I mean, I'm glad my hotel wasn't near the souk in Doha because I don't think anyone got any sleep. Your fans were absolutely brilliant.
Okay. You've been in Jeddah, you said, 48 hours, not long enough for me to really ask you what you think of it. But we'll get into the infrastructure of the stadiums and all that. So far, from what you've seen, first time in Saudi, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah? What you've expected outside of the roundabouts vibe so far? How's the experience?
I didn't expect there to be so many shopping malls.
Yeah,
I didn't expect the grid system. I was expecting more parks, and apparently there are loads of parks here, but I couldn't find any to run around. So I'm training for the London Marathon, and what's been really good is there's been some very long straights in warm weather to run down, and then my sprint coming up the Mall for when I finish the London Marathon will have just been honed between trying to cross your roads here in one piece. So I've had two speeds here, my normal tortoise running speed and then absolute cheetah pace getting through the... So yeah, I mean, it is... I need to explore whenever I go to a country. And this is, I think it's one of the reasons I want to come. I've never been here before and you want to explore. And also I think, first rule of American journalism school, if you don't go, you don't know. Yeah. And I think it's very easy to form an opinion, and it's important. So like when I went to Ukraine, I can write more intelligently and more insightfully, having been to a country. I think that is important. So interesting coming here.
You're well traveled. How many countries have you been to?
Well, only 88, and they are
only 88.
Well, we then have a debate in my household whether we should count FIFA countries or whether we should count United Nations countries, because there's a slight
there's a discrepancy.
There is a discrepancy there. Yeah, some of which are political, some of which are territories. So I always go on FIFA.
Isn't that half the countries though? 88? Isn't there 160?
Yeah, it's about 210.
210. Okay.
I'm going on FIFA rankings here. So yeah, I think it's important to go to. And I always tell my kids 2 new countries every year. They're in their 20s. I say just go because you have to explore. I mean, I was sent to school but I went to school briefly in Paris and in Munich growing up, and I think that gives you just a little taste of life doesn't simply revolve around a few streets in central London.
195 by FIFA.
Is that right?
A list of 195, the total number, 195 countries in the world. 193 are UN member states, while 2 are non-member. Well, I mean, through wars and all that, like now you have South Sudan and Sudan and
well, also, I mean, go back
areas.
to the Union in Great Britain. Great Britain,
Yeah.
Northern Ireland, one country. But actually, it's why I'm not a huge fan of the Olympics, because I just view it as England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, huge footballing rivals.
So
Different countries.
interesting point, Henry. Very interesting point. Why is it the UK in the Olympics, and do they still do the Commonwealth Games?
Yes.
It's still on.
Yes.
I remember from back in my days, it's still.
Well, come on, you know us English.
God,
we still fly the flag.
still
and
flying the
we
flag.
Flag for the empire. We still salute.
30 countries in the Commonwealth.
Wow, probably.
Test your knowledge, general knowledge. Commonwealth Games number. This is why it's important. We're like, Mo, why do you have a laptop in front of you? For these reasons.
I mean,
You
I
have
think yeah.
72 nations.
72 nations in the Commonwealth.
Sorry, scratch that.
Wow,
The Commonwealth comprises 56 countries
still
across
56
inhabited continents. The number of a combined population of 2.4 billion people.
Right, but I think there's still one or two sort of rocks in the Pacific which we've claimed,
Perhaps.
probably for oil and fishing reasons. But I don't think they really compete much at table tennis at the Commonwealth Games.
Correct, yeah, including the Falklands.
The couple of the Falklands. No, that was a legitimate.
It's an
military
interesting
exercise.
rivalry. Argentina, England. They're not very fond of each other.
But actually, it's a strange relationship. In fact, there's huge respect there as well.
Okay, good.
You know, I mean, when Maradona came to England, I mean, it was like Beatlemania. I mean, he was huge. I mean, that's a good thing about the English people. And it's coming back to one of our central themes of our discussion. A lot of tolerance. You know, Maradona, you know, England, the home of fair play. We think we invented it. We're bound by it.
We did invent football.
We did invent football. We codified it. The school I went to was very heavily involved in that. But I've seen England players dive in tournaments. I've also seen, obviously, Maradona's infamous hand of God. And yet, the English people, because we are fairly compassionate and broad-minded and football-obsessed, we will celebrate, you know, the second goal as well as bemoan the first. So the relationship with Argentina, again, coming back to political leaders versus good people. You know, I don't think your average English person has got an issue with your average Argentinian person.
Remember when Top Gear did that episode?
Oh, yeah, but that was a little bit provocative because they had the number plate. It was like Falklands 1 or something, and you're thinking, come on, show a bit of respect.
And the number plate or the year of the...
Yeah, 82.
If anyone's going to do it, it's Clarkson. He cracks me up.
Yeah.
Can I get you another water?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind the top.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we'll get you.
Thank you.
Many things. I'm so fond of the game in the UK and how much it's celebrated. And there's nothing like watching a Premier League game where you're 2 meters away from the touchline. I go to games with a very close friend of mine, and we sit in the Matthew Harding corner at Stamford Bridge.
Upper or
Lower.
Yeah.
So I mean, when someone's taking a corner, you can almost. There's nothing like watching a game in
And Matthew was
England.
one of the good guys. I mean, interviewing him down the years, spending time with him. You know, he's obviously Chelsea's benefactor. For those who don't know, passed away very sadly. Amazing man.
Truly, and I love that they named that end after him. But I have to give credit where it's due. I've been to maybe 100 Premier League matches, all the way, maybe not even Premier League. Like I remember watching England in the old Wembley with the pillar in view seats. I remember Poland 3-0 in 95, 96. I wish I went to the Saudi game in 98, the build-up to France 98, where it finished 0-0.
Yeah.
And some might say Saudi-Argentina was the best. But if you think, if I was to really think about it, I think England-Saudi was the best performance for us ever, because we had two exceptional halves. First half against Argentina,
But that was a competitive game.
True, but
That matters.
if you go back and you see who played for England in that game, and it was the last, maybe one or two last games before it was
Brilliant.
Beckham, it was Sheringham, it was Ince, it was Gaza, it was
Owen, Campbell.
probably Owen as
Seaman.
well. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Owen was on the bench, I think.
big-
It was huge.
big boys, the Neville brothers.
Yeah.
Even Ince was in it. And Saudi had their last hurrah of legends as well. Or Iran, you mentioned him, Samuel Jabir and all these people, and Da'iyah, who was the reason why I became a goalkeeper.
Right.
200 international caps. My point in all of that rant is I've never felt any racism from Chelsea fan, when Charlton Wright Phillips would do something wrong, you wouldn't hear anything.
No.
When Essien would do something, you wouldn't hear anything. When Malouda, you wouldn't hear anything.
30 years ago, you would have done.
Probably 30 years. Yes,
Yeah,
of course.
That's, I mean, Chelsea had a famous player who you know, Paul Canaville, who was racially abused.
Before my time.
Yeah, but I mean, that was like 80s. Yeah, it was
I saw. Did you see that movie Cast, the West Ham supporter, West Ham?
Yeah.
Excellent movie.
Yeah.
Actually, that told me a lot of what things were like. It wasn't just crowd violence and hooliganism, but it was a lot of racial as well, wasn't it, in the 60s and 70s?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that England are exemplary, honestly, when it comes to treating players objectively and not showing any signs of racism, irrespective of what a player of dark skin would do. But you go to Italy, and I think they're still throwing bananas at black players during corners, which you'd really think that shouldn't be the case today, but it is.
Shouldn't have ever been the case.
Ever been the case. You're right. I'll let me fix that. But even so, more now, Henry, like during an age where there's social media, education is probably better than ever. Like, you should have learned from how things didn't work in the days of your ancestors and learn from it. Like, we should always be better year on year.
Yeah. And
England is, because there was a problem in the 70s. It isn't a problem now. Italy's kind of the same way they were in the 70s. They really have. Balotelli struggled a lot in Italy with that. Yeah. And it's something close to my house. Something close to my chest and my heart. And sorry for hijacking the conversation, but I just wanted to.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's good that you get it out there, and it's important that you make that point on a regular basis. But the key word is education. So punishment. I mean, UEFA are so weak on these things, and FIFA have been weak. The actual punishing of countries who've racially abused England's black players, because obviously that's my sort of area of experience. Obviously, there are issues in Italy and Spain, some domestic issues.
I didn't know Spain has it.
Spain had it, yeah. I can remember an Arsenal game at Valencia, and there's a sort of what's called the mix zone system where the players walk through afterwards, and they often don't want to talk to the press, particularly if they've lost. Patrick Vieira stopped us. This was when the Arsenal Invincible side was playing over there. And
such a good team.
The Mestalla, there was a knot. I mean, Valencia's an amazing city. Hemingway. I mean, it's got so much going for it. But in Mestalla, there was a nasty racist knot in the corner who were racially abusing Patrick Vieira in particular, and he stopped us and said, "You've got to write about this. We've written about this already. We've already complained to UEFA. We've talked to Arsenal. We've talked to Valencia." And in the end, Patrick Vieira ended up getting fined for his criticism of UEFA. Wow. And we were thinking, well, so where's the balance here? You've got a black player, black person being racially abused, and he's the one ended up getting fined. So, wherever you are and whatever you do in life, it's always good to open your eyes and imagine yourself walking in someone else's shoes. And I'm a white guy from a sort of fairly privileged background in the UK, and just to see what Patrick went through, to see what Marcus and Bukayo and Jadon went through, two of whom I have huge respect for. Jadon Sancho, particularly with things at Manchester United. I think he's slightly he's not shown the respect to his career and to his profession as he could have done. But what happened to him that night at Wembley was an utter disgrace and an embarrassment on our country. And even though some people said, well, social media, it's a global thing, a lot of the abuse was coming from English sources. So yeah, absolutely. You have to clamp down on racism wherever it is. But coming back to your central point, education is key. You have to talk to people. I talk to players about Black History Month, and I mean, why should it just be a month? The education at school should actually be but should be more global.
I love that.
And I don't know what the situation is in Saudi, but I imagine you're taught Saudi history. In England, you're taught English history. And fortunately, because I was sent to school, I had a view of the world through French eyes, a view of the world through German eyes. Although I did in Munich, I got the one bad team in Bayern Munich's history, 79-80. It wasn't a great team, which is unfortunate, but I did get to go to the old stadium. It's important. This is the sort of the essence of what we've been talking about today, is tolerance and understanding others' perspective.
Yeah.
But also pushing society at home and abroad in the right direction. We can have a debate about what the right direction is, but I think that direction has to include tolerance. Yeah. And if that's for gay rights, for whatever rights, workers' rights, that has to be the direction. Essentially, it comes down to people like you and me, the majority of people in a country, Saudi, England, who are good people and wanting to do the right thing. And in England, we are, even people who might be struggling financially will dig deep. They'll find some money for the earthquake victims in Turkey. Are women equal here?
Are women equal here? 10 years ago, they weren't. 5 years ago, they weren't. Women 5 years ago wouldn't be able to drive a car, wouldn't be able to own a business, wouldn't be able to travel within Saudi to stay in a hotel, wouldn't be able to own a business. And today, not just the fact that we have our Saudi ambassador to the US who's a woman. My sister owns a business and can drive a car to her place of business and operate with just as much flexibility as I have. So to answer your question, they are more equal than ever.
Good.
And I don't think there is this claim that Saudi women are so unhappy here. And I encourage those who think that Saudi women are unhappy here and suppressed, go talk to one.
Yeah.
Ask her how she feels. I'll wait. It's not the case anymore. You guys are, you can't, run a FIFA Club World Cup, or you can't do But yeah, we probably couldn't.
I don't think anyone would question whether you can run events because you've got the money and you can bring in the expertise, and there's expertise here. I don't think you've got the West sort of patronizing that.
But for those who don't know what's been happening here in the last 5 years, they'd go by our reputation. And that's why Prince Abdulaziz, Minister of Sport, he was actually on a conversation with a Western journalist recently, and he asked him about sports washing, and he asked him about capabilities, and Prince Abdulaziz was like, honestly, because we know how capable we are, we want to compete with hosting events on the world stage. But it's socio-economic more than anything, but obviously we'll never get credited for that. We're going to be labeled as, oh, you're doing that because you want to get the attention of XYZ.
But you're doing it because you want to change the image of your country.
How about doing it for giving events of prominence access to our people?
Yeah, it's great. Absolutely. I agree with that in terms of events being shared around. Mm-hmm. But I think your point is you want them on merit.
Why wouldn't it have been off merit?
Because we just had Qatar.
But we're not Qatar.
No, but in terms of rotating it around the world.
But it's 2 World Cups away.
Yeah, but the world's a big place. You just told me how many FIFA countries there are.
True.
Of which maybe 30 possibly can host it. And obviously we had a bit of joint hosting. So regionally, Australia will be putting their hands up and going, oh, just because Infantino's suddenly found a new love for Saudi.
I'm taking my son to a match in Riyadh on Friday. When would I have ever traveled domestically to watch a football match? My son loves Ronaldo. We're getting on a flight Friday morning to go watch him play Steven Gerrard's team. But that's socio-economic, that's creating local interest, that's creating foreign interest as well for people who want to come in. So I reject the sports washing, and I do believe the economical gains gained from getting these household names into the country for business-related reasons.
Well, the economic gains have been gloriously felt by the Premier League clubs who have to juggle FFP, financial fair play, and the fact that the Saudis have come along with bagfuls of cash has been fantastic. What you need to do is, without being on the Western media high horse, is develop more of your own, because you've got some good young players here.
Grassroots.
And yeah, absolutely grassroots. And you're a very young country as well, aren't you? I mean, it's a remarkable statistics.
100 years old in 2030.
Yeah, but also, and the age of your population, you should be a football powerhouse.
Do you know what it is? It's 50% under 25.
It's unbelievable. I mean, whenever that statistic came around. So your PR is doing well, because I didn't know that statistic until some of your government ministers started telling us in the West. So, I mean, it's fantastic. But this comes back to my central point. Everyone should have a shot at this tournament. But I just think coming so soon after Qatar, coming back to this region, it is an issue. 12 years, absolutely. And it is... I completely accept your football country. I've covered you. I know that. I've heard your fans in the souks that your performances at the World Cup. You are a good football country, which Qatar wasn't. But I do have a slight issue in how it was the World Cup was claimed, and that story will run and run until 2034.
So would you reject if I made comparisons as to how Europe hosted it 8 years apart?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and I campaigned at the time. I said it should absolutely go around the world. So I celebrated Japan, Korea. I was pushing for Australia. I was pushing for Argentina and Uruguay. It'd been fantastic if FIFA has their wisdom have pulled a political stunt, and there are going to be games in Argentina and Uruguay in 2030 because it's the 100th anniversary of Montevideo and all that.
But
why couldn't you have had the tournament there? And then people say, well, they haven't got the stadiums. Uruguay and Argentina and Chile, if they'd involved them, are massive football countries.
Incredible, yeah.
And surely a government, the Saudis will do for 2030, will build the stadiums. And if you do it intelligently, which unfortunately the Brazilians, I went to the stadium in Manaus where England played Italy up there in 2014, and what's happened to that stadium? So it's got to be done intelligently with environmental and financial concerns in mind, and longevity, making sure that it goes to a good local club, and building those stadiums. But Latin America should have it. Latin America, the two, we're talking hothouse areas of the world, Europe and Latin America, and they are
produce the best players.
Absolute European and Latin American countries, journalists, national associations will say we should host the World Cup more. I totally agree with it being passed around the world, but I think let's respect Australia. I can see China bidding for it, and knowing FIFA, they probably want North Korea to bid for it.
True, but with China, you're probably facing an issue that Qatar faced, which is the quality of the football. I mean, you can't have a host country get automatic qualifications if you're going to lose all 3 group matches.
Yeah, the only thing is the way that FIFA have done it, basically everyone qualifies for the World Cup. My local village team will qualify.
They're up to 64 teams.
It's 48, but it's
48,
it's bonkers. It is crazy.
I don't know if I like that.
Well, FIFA talk about players overplaying and environmental issues, and they're going to get millions of people, thousands of people, tens of thousands of people flying all over the States, Canada and Mexico.
Okay. I want you just to, for a second, buy into how excited the youth are in this country. Yeah. And when I say youth, I mean maybe my age, 40 and below, for building a better Saudi Arabia than we've ever seen. And having earned Expo 2030 has been so much validation that wow, we actually have something now. We have a little strawberry or cherry to run towards. Yeah. I'm thinking of these hound races where you're running towards this fake bone, although there's nothing fake about Expo 2030. But it was a validation that we see what you're doing, and we're going to take a bet on you. So okay, France 98 was in Europe, and then Germany 2006, 8 years apart. I understand Europe is more established as a footballing continent, but giving Saudi World Cup 2034. How about just take a hunch for 1 second and think that maybe these guys will deliver on something exceptional?
Oh, I don't think that's in dispute. I think it's the manner in which it was acquired. I think it's the manner in the fact that it's the World Cup. It should be shared around the world, that other countries, other regions, particularly as you say, having had it here in the Gulf, in Qatar, I think absolutely it should be shared around. I don't think you should have an inferiority complex about questioning whether you can do it. Just look around this room. You've got one of the most sophisticated podcasts I've ever been to anywhere in the world. And I do a lot of these things, and it's fantastic.
That means a lot coming from you.
No, it's brilliant, and I can see why you're successful. Plus, you have famous people like my brother on.
And yourself.
Very much, I should actually be the warm-up act, and then you bring my brother on like a sort of.
Hey, if I met you before your brother.
Yeah, we'd have just talked Chelsea. But yeah, absolutely. So you have the expertise. Again, coming back to respect for individual people in individual countries. I drive around here and, I get driven around here and sort of hop in and out of taxis and survive roundabouts. And, you are you're not a little village in the desert, so don't do yourself down. You have but compete for competitions fairly. Understand when you are hosting events that the people who are coming to your country are your guests and might have different ways of doing things. And there has to be a meeting in the middle. this is how we do things. Respect for the Quran, respect for our way of doing things. But also, if you are going to invite people to your house, you have to expect that actually, and you've got this event that belongs to the world, which is now on your doorstep. You've got to open up a little bit.
Where do you draw the line of, you said that when people come to your doorstep and attend matches and all that, where do you draw the line between those coming from out respecting the local cultures and the indigenous respecting those who are coming from abroad, their cultures?
Meeting in the middle.
Fine line, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a fine line, but the World Cup is about two teams competing, nations getting to learn. I mean, some of the events, some of the parties effectively in Japan, I mean, they were Arab teams. It's brilliant going into this bar on the 8th floor of one of those sort of strange Tokyo tower blocks you go into, and it's all residential, and you come out on the 8th floor and there's a wild party going on. There's a bar in there. And there was I'm sure it was Saudi Arabian fans. It was Saudi Arab. I'm pretty sure it was Saudi Arabian fans. And they were all down one end of the room, 10 Saudi Arabians, all in the beautiful robes, drinking dark Cokes. And then 15 Republic of Ireland fans come flying through the door, all drunk, all singing.
At least they were all wearing green.
But they were all wearing green. Absolutely, they were all wearing green. Yeah, it was the Green Party, and they all had pints of Guinness. And I can just remember I was sort of sitting in the middle, and eventually they were all together, and I just heard one of them go over to the bar and said, "That'd be 10 pints of Guinness and 10 dark Pepsis," and it was brilliant. And that is what the event is about. And you travel all over and you see the mixing. I mean, Germany 2006 was wonderful because everyone travelled around on the trains. And it was, you would poke your head in one carriage and there would be people from all over the world united by obviously a love of football, but also a love of life and a respect for others. So I do think, maybe I'm being slightly sort of over-idealistic, but I think there's something very special about the World Cup which shows us how we can live together when the people just come face to face.
Yeah, I agree. The most thing that excites me is that if we're so new to the organization element of it all and we're only 4 years into it, what are we going to look like with 13, 14 years under our belts? That's why I'm so bullish of 2034.
Brilliant. But don't do yourself down. You will be able to host it. You could see, because also FIFA come in and countries get FIFA-fied. Yeah. When tournaments go on, and you will have British broadcasters, you'll have American caterers, you will have obviously your own indigenous population. Just make sure you've got a really good team. Because I've been to tournaments, and when the host team goes out, it's different because with Qatar, because no one really cared about Qatar as a football country. But when the host team does go out, like Japan in 2002, it's like there's a death in the room.
Yeah.
Already this far out, you're far more of a football country, and people know that. People respect that.
There's more of a history.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Whenever a country hosts a World Cup, you get automatic qualification. And if I'm not mistaken, Qatar was the first time a country qualified by merit of hosting it, which already had a question mark in its own right. We've qualified 4 times. I think Qatar was our 5th. Question for you. How much longer do you see yourself in this business and industry? You mentioned that you've done it for 36, 37 years. Yeah. How much longer do you see yourself going for? Does anyone ever ask you that question?
Until I get, regularly. My boss can't get rid of me. I love the competitive element. I love at the end of every week, every Friday evening, I have a sort of like a work audit in my mind, thinking, well, the guy from the Daily Mail did that better. The woman from the Guardian did that better. And I think when you lose that, stop. But I mean, it's not a job. I get, I'm here. I'm getting paid to be in your country to watch football. I travel all around the world. I do 130, 140 games a year.
What a job.
It is. Yeah, I'd be stacking shelves in one of your many shopping malls if I wasn't doing this. So no, it's not a proper job. It's great. And you know what's fantastic about it? It gives you a clearer, I wouldn't necessarily clear, view on actually what people are like.
Yeah.
Because you go around, you meet people, you travel,
yeah.
And that American thing, if you don't go, you don't know.
Yeah. A lot of the gurus that I listen to, they have a common denominator on how to live lives, and after meditation, travel seems to be number 2 or number 3. They're all about meditation.
Really?
It's huge. Have you ever tried it?
Yeah. No, thank you.
You don't strike me as someone that would meditate.
No.
Yeah, you probably just write articles in the corner of the coffee shop.
No.
But meditation, see, it's like trending and it's in now. But second on the list
Okay, I'll try it.
is travel, because with travel gives you tolerance and understanding of people, and realizing that, you know, not everything is like, you know, the British high street where you have everything at your fingertips. Some people actually need to walk a couple of miles to get clean water, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
We're fortunate enough to get clean water delivered, but like you go to some places in Africa and you hear stories of people walking 2 hours a day to get clean water.
Yeah.
And that's tolerance, when you realize how people are.
So some of the African players, when they come to the UK, we have that conversation.
Wow.
And it's very humbling. And when you hear it and then you get involved with them and you try to sort of help them with schemes. But I mean, Sadio Mane, I mean, I completely understand if he's made 1 or 2 decisions in his life which are financially driven, because he is looking after literally thousands of people back home.
Wow, really?
Yeah, amazing guy.
And you'd be surprised how little each person needs to survive on an annual.
And how much
compared to-
pressure is placed on. I've talked to African players, so I mean, you know, and English players will be the same, but not so heavily. But there is a demand. They say, you know, my distant cousin, my son is going off to university. Can you pay for his fees? You know, and that puts pressure on a lot of the players. But again, as you say, it gives you a take on how they work.
It does. Thank you so much for your time.
No, my pleasure.
We could have gone for 2 more hours easily, but I know you have to be someplace 20 minutes ago.
We didn't even touch on Chelsea.
We didn't. Let's wrap up with that. Does it bother you that Chelsea and Man United are competing on who is having a more horrific season?
I mean, as a journalist, I quite like changing narratives. And I think that's the way sport should be. I mean, if you have owners who don't care or are not intelligent enough in what they do, in the first place, the Glazers, they don't care about Manchester United, and in Todd Boehly, the Americans at Chelsea. I mean, it is quite entertaining and quite instructive and quite reassuring that you've got 1 or 2 people coming in from the outside who are brilliant businessmen in their own field. And I've met Todd, and they just make mistake after mistake, but they'll get it right. You know, and that's the one thing I will say to the credit of the Saudis. They've not put a foot wrong in terms of PR, in terms of investment, and in terms of appointment.
I think we've learned from City.
Yeah.
With all their spending, it took 15 years to win the Champions League.
Yeah. Well, if Newcastle win the Champions League in 15 years, you should be happy, because it's so competitive.
Maybe the target is 10.
Well,
I mean, maybe.
What about Vision 2030? I think you've got to be
right
quicker.
Aligned with it.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, going back to how we should be getting better with time, we're in a place of privilege now where we can learn from those who went before us.
Yeah.
And City I mean, we spoke about, you know, financial fair play, and I don't think Newcastle or PIF wants to go down that road where we're getting.
And also they've got a manager who quite likes working and developing players, and in Eddie Howe, you've got a brilliant manager.
Correct.
The only issue with Newcastle is going to be late next year when Gareth Southgate probably stands down, because Eddie Howe will be the number 1 choice for England. I imagine if the arc of the sort of Newcastle's rise, which has slowed slightly, but it continues, then he'll obviously want to continue at Newcastle United.
Probably swap jobs, probably Gareth for Newcastle. No,
Middlesbrough, and he's not good enough.
Okay.
Middlesbrough connection for a Middlesbrough player. That's probably less of an issue, but I think that he's not Champions League level.
Are you surprised that Eddie Howe is still at Newcastle?
Yeah,
or
no, sorry, I'm
not surprised.
No, not surprised at all.
Great season last year.
Sensible owners, good manager. The people they've appointed, Darren Eales came in from Atlanta. I know him. He's a fantastic CEO. Dan Ashworth, the sporting director. Fantastic, intelligent people. So I think there's been a lot of respect to the appointment structure and the decisions that the Saudi owners have made.
And they love, and the fans love. I'm friends with Murdad, Amanda's husband.
Yeah.
They love his great guy. Him and Ruben. Yeah. They it's like, you are the owners that we've been looking for, type of thing. And that told me a lot about the previous outgoing owner.
Yeah.
And they love the banter that they have with each other on social media, and
which is good.
Fans are happy, you know. Obviously, they're not happy with the Champions League exit. Obviously, they're not happy with the penalty.
Do you know what? If you actually talk to Newcastle fans, partly because of what they went through under Mike Ashley, but also they're just seeing a team playing with pride.
Yeah.
They are seeing, you know, they've gone out of the Champions League, but okay, there was a disgraceful decision against them in the PSG game. You know, they've got good young players. They like it. And what they're also liking, and maybe it's a sort of very British thing, is they've got some of their own. i.e. homegrown players, and they love that coming through, kids coming through. So it's not all about superstars.
So from Newcastle, not England, you mean?
Yeah, so
specifically
from
Newcastle.
the area, yeah.
From the area.
Yeah.
Trippier isn't, is he?
No, Trippier's not. Trippier's sort of Manchester borders, but I mean, he could be, because he embodies the area in terms of his work ethic. But, you've got, Miley, he's a kid from a local ex-colliery town. Dan Byrne, who was working, pushing supermarket trolleys around a car park, and because his career wasn't going anywhere, now he's come back and he's doing well. And they love that. They love that sort of narrative. Again, it comes back to people. It comes back to emotional connection, and ultimately it comes back to respect.
It's very genuine when it's a one-club city.
Totally, it's a good point. I mean, one-club cities like Leeds, Newcastle.
Wow. That was another good story, by the way. Up there with Blackburn and Leicester. Leeds had a good run.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
That run, there's some good players, Jonathan Woodgate, Smith, players like that in the team.
Ellen Road, that was a stadium.
Ellen Road is mad. I mean, that is just such an intense stadium.
That would be one to be purchased for any other states looking to, I don't know if you can anymore, but that's one.
Well, the 49ers have bought them.
San Francisco 49ers?
Yeah.
Bought Leeds United?
Yeah. I mean, they had a percentage of it, and they've gradually been increasing. And I went to a game at Leicester the other night. I wasn't working, and I was in the sort of director's box, and I saw the 49ers owners. And it's quite interesting where you've got an opportunity just to sort of see someone's body language, see their connection with the game and people and staff. They're embedded. I was really impressed with them. So that's what Leeds need. They need owners with deep pockets, but also owners who care and are in it for the long haul.
Are they in the third division now?
No, they're second tier. God, don't relegate them
championship?
another division. Yeah, championship. Don't relegate them another division. God, they've got enough issues. God,
I just haven't heard from them in a long time.
Oh, that's such a Chelsea perspective.
I'm
Chelsea. I'm sorry. That is. You are Chelsea.
Like I know Derby is still in the championship and hasn't gone down. I know Reading, which is a city, a club close to my heart as well. And I wish they'd go back to Premier League, but I didn't know.
If you've got any wealthy friends, they are
Reading,
desperate,
huh?
I mean, really desperate. It's
wow.
They've been demonstrating outside the Houses of Parliament.
Wow, they had a good run in the Premier League.
That's English football for you.
Thank you so much for this. We could have gone many hours. I really appreciate it.
No, I really enjoyed it.
Next time you come, hopefully before World Cup 2034. We can get on a podcast and continue this.
You have to have my sister on now, because she is we'll build up.
The trifecta. Now I get all three.
Absolutely. And she'll go straight in at number one, because she's really interesting.
And the way you spoke about her, you said she's the most impressive one. So now she's going to be on my scouting list.
She absolutely.
Sure. Thanks for the banter. Thank you for putting up with my pushiness. I guess there was so much.
Thanks for inviting me on, because it's very impressive.
Yeah.
Don't leave this room, because this is special. It's got good vibes.
I'll keep it. Thanks for entertaining me and answering every question.
Yeah.
I watch so much Western press that maybe I just took a bit too much out on you, but you're such a professional. You are the way you tackled every question and decided to convince me on some, and maybe me convincing you on others. Just I'm hoping would have made this some very watchable content for our viewers.
I think as results go, it's probably a score draw.
I'll take that.
We didn't have VAR.
Against you, I'll take that. I'll take that. With or without VAR.
Yeah, but this is the first leg. You've got to come back to London now.
Oh, shit. I'm injured.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Henry, so much.
My pleasure.
Cheers, brother.
Really enjoyed it.
Me too.